Well, let's see. We have two teams in the Super Bowl this year who I think could both make the argument. You have a budding dynasty in the Chiefs, and you have another one in the 49ers that seems like if they win this year, that could kickstart a dynasty based on what they've done under Kyle Shanahan. Do you feel that same way?
Yeah, I'm really interested with the 49ers and kind of who they're going to be. I think, this is obviously a monster legacy Super Bowl. And you're talking about maybe kicking off a dynasty. I almost wonder if they lose this game to Kansas City, are they the modern day Buffalo Bills, the kind of the 90s, the modern the dynasty that kind of never was, because they've been to a Super Bowl. They're now appearing in a second one. It seems like every single year they're in an NFC championship. They're pegged by many as a Super Bowl betting favorite, a preseason darling. They have all the talent in the world, and just those breaks that need to go your way, whether it's luck or what have you, it just doesn't seem like it's been going San Francisco's way. So if they don't win this one, I think the narrative kind of changes a little bit. Sure, of course, they're going to be talented. They're going to be great down the line because they have a ton of talent, but are they able to reach that ceiling? Are they able to be a Super Bowl champion? Or are they going to be one of these teams that is kind of lost in history because they never were able to climb that mountaintop? So right now, I mean, we're talking about them teetering on 90s Bills territory as opposed to sparking off some sort of dynasty.
Yeah, and if you don't win one, it is easy to get forgotten history. And even I would say an almost better comparison might be the Eagles during their run with Andy Reid, where they did get the one Super Bowl, but they lost. And then you look at what else they did in their NFC title games. I think they went to four straight NFC title games, lost the first three, finally broke through and won one. And then got to the Super Bowl. And then they got to another NFC title game in 2008. So you're talking about a team that went to 5 NFC title games between 2001 and 2008, but didn't have a Super Bowl to show for it. So it was just everyone, they don't forget about it, but it's not a team you talk about as a dominant team. And one more team that really kind of proves this point, that if you don't win the Super Bowl, that eventually it's going to be remembered as the team that couldn't do it, whether you buckled under the pressure. The Los Angeles Rams, Tyler, went to, let's see, 5 NFC championship games in 6 years in the 70s. Did you know that?
Nope.
Yeah, exactly. Because they didn't win a Super Bowl. That's really what it comes down to. You have a team.
It's a great point.
5 NFC title games in 6 years. And I would say that most NFL fans probably didn't know that. And it's because they didn't win a Super Bowl. And that's really what it comes down to. And if you're the 49ers and you win this year, like that flips everything, because then you have you have one Super Bowl, but you have 2 Super Bowl appearances in 5 seasons. You have 4 NFC title game appearances in 5 seasons. Then in 2024, it would feel like, if they're coming off a Super Bowl win this season, does it feel like 2024 is where, hey, if they win it again, this is a dynasty now?
Right. I think that then you're saying, okay, they've found their quarterback. Brock Purdy's clearly the guy. You can start to get those wheels in motion. So yeah, I mean, you could even argue, as crazy as it sounds, this is a bigger legacy game for San Francisco than it is for Kansas City. And Kansas City could win their 3rd Super Bowl in 5 years. It's remarkable that they'd actually be called a dynasty. So it is pretty remarkable when you kind of put it in that context. But I certainly think that's the case, because this has been a team that for years now, they've just been plagued with injuries, plagued with quarterback uncertainty. And for most other teams, that would be a death sentence. The fact that Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt, you finally get a good, healthy season from him, you make it to a Super Bowl, but he can't make that last pass. And all of a sudden you say, okay, he's clearly not the guy to take us to that next pinnacle. Let's trade up to number 3 overall and go get Trey Lance. We give up all of these assets and it blows up in our face. But for whatever reason, they have the stability and the structure to absorb something that really should be franchise shattering. They find Brock Purdy with the last overall pick. He proves to be the guy. And they kind of they landed on their feet. They're in the Super Bowl. So the fact that those things are breaking their way, and if they can get over the hump now with Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy, you can kind of project going forward, this team could be the favorite for multiple seasons to come.
And it's funny you brought up Kyle Shanahan because I feel like he is the one guy in the Super Bowl who has more pressure on him than anyone. I mean, look, there's no pressure on Andy Reid anymore. He got that Super Bowl. He got the monkey off his back. Now he has 2 Super Bowl rings. Now he's trying to etch his name as one of the best coaches in NFL history, top 3 coach. You get a 3rd Super Bowl, you're in that argument. Maybe he beats Bill Belichick to the all-time wins record at the rate things are going. It would be crazy for him to pass Belichick. That would have been crazy to think about 2 or 3 years ago, but now it seems absolutely possible. With Shanahan, though, it is you have a guy who was the offensive coordinator for a team that blew a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl. You have a guy who was the head coach for the second largest blown lead in a Super Bowl, with the 49ers blowing a 10-point lead in the 4th quarter to the Chiefs the last time these two teams played. So it just feels like they have to get this or there is no dynasty. It's just not happening.
For sure. And to go beyond the dynasty thing too, we're talking legacies. You mentioned Andy Reid there. For years, we were clowning on Andy Reid and his clock management. I mean, it was a meme, it was a joke. Anytime there was some clock management situation that he blundered, everybody would clown on him. You don't hear that now. You don't hear any of that. You don't see that because obviously you have Patrick Mahomes, who's an unreal game manager, but he's also backed it up with wins. If Kyle Shanahan is able to get a Super Bowl or 2 under his belt, all of those kind of side stories go away, especially during a playoff run where we're seeing him overcome a 17-point deficit against the Lions in the NFC Championship. I mean,
Right.
the fact that you're able to overcome now those blown leads and win a title, all of those narratives will go away. Just like Andy Reid and the clock management, you put some Lombardis behind you, all those little things that people used to pick and prod at you, they kind of get a little faded on in the background.
Right. But the flip side is if you don't get it, it just exacerbates the
Sure.
pressure and it just gets worse. And Kyle Shanahan can't win the big game. Kyle Shanahan melts down in key situations. I mean, that's all anybody was talking about after the Packers game. 49ers won, but it was still, man, Kyle Shanahan had no idea what he's doing with his clock management at the end of the first half. It was kind of picking apart what he did because the 49ers didn't win by more when they were a 1 seed playing a 7 seed. I think one thing that's interesting is that, look, it's not part of their dynasty because it was a whole different era with Jim Harbaugh, but you are talking about a team. They've gone to 7 NFC title games in the past 13 years. I mean, does that blow your mind? Just think about that.
It's remarkable. I mean, but there's a difference between when we're talking about dynasty and we're talking about organizational stability. I
Right.
mean, we could talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers never having a losing season under Mike Tomlin, and that's all well and good. But what is the ceiling of that team? It's certainly not a dynasty. It's just that you don't bottom out, you don't stink, and that there's something to be said for that. But that doesn't put you in the pantheon of dynasty, which I would say is the highest team realm you could put an organization in an era in. So, yeah, it's great that this team, the 49ers, has been competitive throughout the turn of pretty much their entire existence, it feels like. But it doesn't necessarily push them into that next tier. You put some Lombardis on there and you start to rack up a few with Purdy and Shanahan, then we could start talking about you in that regard. And that starts obviously on February 11th in the Super Bowl. But right now, you're at a very interesting crossroads about how you're going to be remembered.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did mention that the organizational stability. And it is crazy to think about how long this team has been relevant and good. I mean, we're going back to 1981 with Joe Montana's first Super Bowl and they winning 5 Super Bowls between 1981 and 1994. So it's just mind blowing to see how long the 49ers have been successful. So I think we are kind of in agreement, though, that if they win this game, this is potentially a budding dynasty, right?
For sure. I think that if they win this Super Bowl, you always see like, here's the early odds for next year's Super Bowl. They'll certainly be number 1. Honestly, they might even be number 1 if they lose the Super Bowl. That's how talented they are. So this team is going to be competitive for years to come. It'll be interesting what happens when they have to pay Brock Purdy. And if this dude has a Super Bowl under his belt, that's going to change. It's very easy to build a team behind a dude that's making the salary of Mr. Irrelevant. When you have to pay him relative to the quarterbacks of today's NFL, not even talking about, him being paid as the highest paid quarterback, but you put him in, I don't know, even just the top 10, top 15, that's going to change how your roster is structured. So that'll be interesting. But ultimately, there's talent all across this roster. They should be competitive in 2024 and in 2025.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Purdy's salary. Box seats, get a suite at Allegiant Stadium for the Super Bowl. That costs more than $1 million. That is more than Brock Purdy makes an entire season. He couldn't afford it. And Christian McCaffrey, he makes a ton of money. His family said they're not going to sit in a suite. But I'm guessing Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift will fork over a check and sit in a suite. It's just crazy to think what kind of bargain Brock Purdy is right now.